Okay, good evening and welcome to my presentation. My name is Christopher Bollyn and the presentation is called Solving 9/11 Ends the War. And by that I mean solving 9/11 ends the war on terror. Because solving 9/11 was actually the seminal event which gave us the war on terror. And as I will try to show you in this presentation of about 45 minutes, what I want to show you is that the war on terror is a fraud, is a deception that was born of another fraud, a hoax, which was 9/11. I'm the author of a set of books called Solving 9/11. The two books, the first book is The Deception That Changed the World, the smaller book. And the larger book is the original articles, Solving 9/11, the original articles, which contains 12 years of my articles from 2001 to 2012. And those are the articles that contain the research information and the details that support the thesis. My credentials are I was an investigative journalist in Washington for the first 6 years of the century. Prior to that, I got my degree in history at the University of California. My specialty was Israel and Palestine. And authored those two books. And before that, I was a Boy Scout, Eagle Scout, and I grew up outside Chicago. This photograph is from the Citizens Grand Jury we had in California in 2004. So, why does the truth of 9/11 still matter? Why is it important that we understand what really happened on 9/11? Well, a good historical analogy is, why does the murder of President Kennedy still matter? 53 years later. Well, the murder of Kennedy matters because it was a coup d'etat in which the powers behind the assassination took control of the government and orchestrated the cover-up. And a coup d'etat that is kept secret in a democratic country means that the succeeding government is illegitimate. For example, the U.S. military involvement in the undeclared war in Vietnam went on for 20 years, from 25 until 75. And the Kennedy assassination still matters because the U.S. government continues to support the lies of the Warren Commission. The Kennedy assassination matters because the mainstream media continues to support and even endorse the official version. The Kennedy assassination matters because when the government supports the lies about the murder of the president, it means that the powers that killed Kennedy are still in charge to this day. A graph shows the public opinion in the United States. The light green line is the percentage of people who think that there were others involved. The bottom line is those who think that the Warren Commission was correct and there was only one assailant, one assassin. So, why does 9/11 still matter? A very apt analogy here. It matters because the government continues to lie about what happened to this state. Both administrations that we've been under, Bush and Obama, continue to lie and base policies on those lies. And it matters because it was a policy coup that brought us the war on terror. And as you know, the war on terror began 3 weeks later in Afghanistan and is ongoing to the present day. And they're talking about bringing more troops into Afghanistan and Iraq as we speak. The latest phase, is this Islamic State, this nebulous organization that seems to have great power. And it's interesting, in 2014, when the video of an American, the second American who was apparently beheaded, was shown, it was presented to the media through an Israeli intelligence website based in Bethesda called Site Intelligence Group. And they had sent to their subscribers, like CNN and BBC and Fox News, they had sent this video before the group itself had released the video. So you have to wonder what the connection is. Well, this is the woman from Bethesda, Maryland, Rita Katz. She's an Israeli of Iraqi origin who is the head of Site Intelligence Group. And they present such videos like this, often with their logo in the upper corner. And here, in this case, when the second beheading video came out, she said that we released it, first because we actually had that video beforehand and were able to beat them with the release. So before the actual beheaders or the ISIS could release the video to anybody, this Israeli website had released it to the media, which gives you some indication of the order of hierarchy in this organization, perhaps. Now here's the latest video. It came out just the other day, in which the Israeli website, it stands for Search for International Terrorist Entities Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. It shows 9 of these extremists who carried out the attacks in Paris. It shows them beheading and shooting captives as well as preparing for the attack. So this is like after the Paris attack, they're now presenting sort of video material to cement the operation, so people get in their mind, yes, these guys did it, and these guys are ISIS, and ISIS is attacking European capitals. So this is the latest phase in the war on terror. Now, 9/11 Truth matters also because for 14 years, the mass media has pushed the lies. Not just the videos, but the lies about 9/11 and the fraudulent war on terror. All the while suppressing the real evidence and facts that disprove or bring into question the official narrative of what happened on 9/11, which we call the official myth. This was a cover of Time magazine. Why the war on terror will never end. Well, thank you very much. Now, here is Rupert Murdoch, one of the biggest media moguls in the world, and that man is Mr. Rothschild. I think it's Jacob Rothschild. And what you need to understand about the media is that today in the United States, the media is in the hands of 6 companies. This is one of the biggest companies, News Network. And people like Rupert Murdoch, who have pushed the 9/11 myth and the war on terror, they're actually complicit in a criminal fraud, along with the terrorists who bombed the Twin Towers. And the banksters like the Rothschilds create these media moguls in countries around the world. They support them with money because they need to control public opinion. And the Rothschilds and Murdoch are involved and invested in oil companies in, for example, the Golan Heights. And so you can understand that these chaps would like to see the Golan Heights as part of Israel, because that would give their oil companies access to that, easier access to that wealth. The Rothschilds are also invested in the oil of Kurdistan, north of Iraq. So if the government and media are lying to us about 9/11, it means that they are controlled by the same people who carried out 9/11. That's a very important statement. But it's completely logical that if the media and the government are protecting the people, they're protecting the lies about 9/11, they're only protecting the guilty. They're protecting the people who carried out 9/11. And so we, the people, have been deceived, while the government and the media should be investigating the crime. But it was never investigated. So if you are skeptical about the official account of 9/11, you're in very good company, because only 40% of the green section, only 40% of the American population believe the official version. The rest are doubtful. And this shows that as time went on from 2002 to 2006, a growing number of people thought that the Bush administration was lying about what happened on 9/11 and their knowledge, their former knowledge of previous knowledge. And in 2006, when they found that only 16% of the people thought the administration was telling the truth, they stopped polling. I should put this thing on. Forgot about this. Is that better? Mm-hmm. Easier to hear? So they stopped polling. And you're in good company as well, because the senior counsel to the 9/11 Commission, for example, he said that in a book that he wrote after his service on the 9/11 Commission, he said what the government and military officials told Congress, the Commission, the media, and the public about who knew what when was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue. And as these are the chairman of the 9/11 Commission, they said to this day they don't know why NORAD told us what they told us. It was just so far from the truth. So the people that wrote the 9/11 Commission didn't believe it themselves. They knew they were being lied to. So when 9/11 occurred, there was a former deputy director of counterterrorism. His name was Larry Johnson, and after he looked at the crime of 9/11 in its completeness, he said, "We don't have anything in history to compare with this. The only thing that comes close to it is a former Soviet intelligence operation." Believe me, it's much more complicated than some 16 or 19 Arabs flying planes into the building. After 9/11 happened, I decided for it to be prudent to go to Europe, and I transferred to Germany. I was a newspaper reporter, and I wrote from Europe. And one of the first people I met talked to was this former intelligence chief in Berlin, and his name was Eckhard Thurmont. And he said the deathly precision and magnitude of planning behind the 9/11 attacks would have required years of planning and the fixed frame of a state intelligence operation. And here I met with, this is Andreas von Bülow, another German politician who was in charge of intelligence in Germany, 3 organizations. And I met him just after, in November 2001. And he told me, he described how these false flag operations, these terrorist operations are how they're constructed. There are three levels of operation. There's the architectural level, who is trying to change public opinion. Then there's the managerial level, who makes the crime happen and organizes the 3rd level, which is the working level, which is part of the deception. So for example, like the 19 Arabs who lived in Florida were being managed by somebody above them. And above them was the architectural level, people who designed the entire operation. Now, 15 of the 19 hijackers, alleged hijackers, lived in Florida, where at least 6 of them had duplicate licenses issued in their name, and several others had reported lost passports. This is a common characteristic with these hijackers, so alleged hijackers. What that means is that there's 2 people using the same identity, and one person is leaving a trail for the other person to implicate the other person. This is an old Mossad trick, which is described in detail in this book by John le Carré called The Little Drummer Girl, in which this woman, Diane Keaton in the film, is leaving a trail behind to implicate a Palestinian as being a terrorist. And in the book, the book was written with the help of former Israeli Mossad and military intelligence people. And one of the head Mossad guys says, "Terror is theater. Theater's a con trick. Do you know what that means, con trick? You've been deceived." And we have been deceived about 9/11. Using the exact same methods. This is an interesting editorial from the New York Times. This is the editorial from the paper itself on September 11th, 2004, by the editorial staff of the paper. And they said, "In the 3 years since 9/11, we've begun to understand that it's possible to know what happened without knowing what happened." That's been the basic position of the mainstream media in this country since 9/11 happened. Basically, we don't need to know what happened. But it was the beginning of the war on terror. And the war on terror has fundamentally changed this country. 9/11 has changed the relationship between the citizen and the state and in a host of ways. But if 9/11 is itself a deception, as I will try to show you in this presentation, then what is the war on terror? Where did it come from? Well, as my research in the Solid 9/11 books shows, the war on terror is primarily a Zionist Israeli fraud based on lies and deception and some exaggeration, as it was when it was first pushed by Benjamin Netanyahu in the 1970s. Benjamin Netanyahu has been pushing this concept of the Western democracies going to war in the Middle East to fight terrorist groups and the regimes that host them since at least 1979, when they had a Jerusalem conference at the Netanyahu Institute. And the war on terror, what is it? It's basically a Zionist war agenda to be fought by the United States and our allies. Here's Mr. Netanyahu. He's the current Prime Minister of Israel. And in 1976 and through 1978, he worked at the Boston Consulting Group, which is a Rothschild-owned firm. In 1979, the Netanyahus, he went back to Israel and worked on an institute with his father called the Netanyahu Institute, in which they hosted this conference in 1979 called the Jerusalem Conference. And George Bush, Senior Bush, was there and spoke there, and in which this idea was first articulated, that the Western democracies should come to the Middle East on a permanent basis and fight the terrorist groups that were attacking Israel. You can see it's Israel's strategic interest to get this arrangement done. On 9/11, Mr. Netanyahu said, asked about by the New York Times, asked about the events of 9/11 and how they would affect Israeli-American relations. He said, it's very good. It will generate immediate sympathy. A couple years later in Israel, he was speaking at an Israeli university. He said, we, meaning the Israelis, are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and the American struggle in Iraq. Those are three things, but in his mind, they're one. It's important to note that Mr. Netanyahu has been the chairman of the Likud coalition in Israel since 1993. Another Israeli was speaking on the BBC World Television from the studio in London before the towers even collapsed, before they even fell. This is Ehud Barak, and he said the world will never be the same from today on. He said it's a time, we know who did it, he said, and he said it's time to launch an operational, concrete war against terror. Now, as I said, this concept of fighting a war on terror is an Israeli construct. And so these guys were using it and to push the agenda, to get their agenda into operation. They had planned it for years. When they put it in operation, 9/11 was the thing that kick-started it and made it happen. Ehud Barak was Mr. Netanyahu's commander in an independent covert commando group called the Sayeret Matkal, which is a covert commando force which serves directly under the Israeli Chief of Staff and military intelligence. At the time, the Israeli military Chief of Staff was this man with the red beret on his shoulder. His name is Shaul Mofaz. And here he is in January 2002, meeting at the Pentagon with these senior civilian Pentagon people like Wolfowitz, Zakheim, Douglas Faith. It's interesting, Douglas Faith's father was also a member of the Irgun and the Beitar. So they have, but this is the Zionist cabal within the Pentagon getting their military marching orders or guidance from the Israelis. That's clear what's happening here. Well, what were they talking about? As Wesley Clark said in 2007, he went to the Pentagon shortly after 9/11, and he saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz, and a general called him in and said, "Sir, we've made the decision, we're going to go to war with Iraq." And Wesley Clark said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" The general said, "I don't know." And he came back a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, sir, it's much worse than that. We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran." As you can see, this is very similar to what has actually happened in the last 14 years. Now, to understand how this is part of Israel's strategic goals, you can look at these words from the founder of the State of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, first prime minister, what have you. Greetings. And he said we should prepare. He said this in May 24th to his general staff. This is just after Israel declared its independence. He said we should prepare to go on the offensive with the aim of smashing Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. And so he already had this plan to expand the hegemony of Israel. And that is basically what the plan is. This is the blue area here. This is what they call Greater Israel, or Eretz Israel. And this map comes from a website, an Israeli website, from an article entitled "What Israel's Future Borders Will Look Like." And you can see that the two boundaries are the River Nile and the Euphrates River in Iraq. And that's what the Israeli flag, the two blue banners on the Israeli flag stand for. Those are the two rivers with the star, the Rothschild star in the middle. How are they going to accomplish this? Well, there's another plan that they have for dominance in the region called the Yinon Plan. And that was translated in 1982, written in 1982 by Oded Yinon, published in a Hebrew magazine, translated into English by Israel Shahak. And the basic idea is that they will break the large Arab countries, the secular Arab countries, into ethnic statelets, just like they did in Yugoslavia. And that was the plan in 1982. You can see that these countries like Iraq and Syria have already been broken into de facto into these ethnic statelets. Iraq is, for example, a fragmented state today, as is Syria. So this is what the Middle East, region looks like according to the map. This is how they want to break it up into fragments. This is exactly what they did in Yugoslavia. So, if you look at the statistics, you see that the war on terror has been extremely counterproductive in that it's increased terrorism tenfold. The amount of terrorism today is much higher than it was before 9/11. And the country most afflicted with terrorism is, of course, Iraq. Defense spending has doubled in fighting war on terror. The green bar is $300 billion per year, and now it's gone up to almost $700 billion. Now, that Likud coalition that Mr. Netanyahu is the chairman of was founded by these three men. These three men are Menachem Begin in the middle, Yitzhak Shamir on the right side, and Ariel Sharon on the left side. These are men who have never halted or been reluctant to use terrorism to accomplish their goals. They committed massacres in which buildings were blown up with people inside. Mr. Sharon committed huge atrocities in Lebanon. This is the emblem of the Irgun terrorist group, which Mr. Begin was the head of. This is a radical Zionist militia that was operational in Palestine in the 30s and 40s. And you can see that the map of Eretz Israel, the larger Israel, is part of their emblem. Here's Mr. Begin in 1948 when Israel became a state. He was born in Russia, came to Palestine in 1942, became the head of the Irgun, and in 1946 ordered the bombing of the King David Hotel, in which 93 people were killed. Then in 1973, he created the Likud. He created it with those people before I showed you, and he became prime minister in 1977. And ever since 1977, this group of terrorists has been the dominant force in Israeli politics. And then he invaded Lebanon in 1978, and again in 1982 with a vengeance. And in the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, at least 20,000 Lebanese civilians were killed. He also ordered the bombing of King David Hotel, as you see there, which was British headquarters in Mandate, Palestine. And there's an explanation why they bombed this headquarters is because the British had conducted a countrywide raid a few weeks before called Operation Black Sabbath, I think it's called. And in that operation, they had found evidence. They had arrested a lot of the leaders of the Jewish community in Palestine. And they had found lots of evidence that implicated these heads of the Jewish yishuv, of the Jewish militia in Palestine, that would have sent them to the gallows. They even found that the Jewish agency itself was involved in terrorism. So that these people like Begin and Shamir were wanted by the Palestine police force during British Mandate. Rami Emanuel, for example, who was the mayor of Chicago and was the senior advisor for Bill Clinton and chief of staff for Barack Obama. Actually, Barack Obama's first appointment was this man. His father was a member of the Lehi, of the Stern Gang, the most radical Zionist terrorist group in Palestine. This is the group that was led by Yitzhak Shamir. I spoke to his father. His father was in Chicago, and he told me that. He admitted that he was a member of Lehi. I asked him if he worked under Begin. He says, no, he was a member of the Stern Gang. Lehi and Stern Gang are the same thing. A British journalist named Russell Warren Howe interviewed Menachem Begin in 1974 and asked him, how does it feel in the light of all that's going on to be the father of terrorism in the Middle East? And Menachem Begin laughed and said, in the Middle East, in all the world. So he was proud. He's proud of his history, of of being the father of terrorism. He doesn't flinch from that moniker. Here's Yitzhak Shamir, the right hand of Menachem Begin in the creation of the Likud. And I remember, these people create the political party that now controls Israel. And he was involved in the murder of Volker Bernadotte, the UN envoy to Palestine, and he was involved in another operation to kill German scientists. And he worked, when he was killing the German scientists that sent bombs and to these German scientists who were helping Egypt to build rockets, he was working under the head of the Mossad named Isser Harel. And Isser Harel was demoted, fired from being the head of the Mossad by Ben Gurion because of his use of terrorism and murder. This is Isser Harel. And in 1980, he was talking to an American Zionist, Christian evangelist from Texas, and the Christian Zionist named Michael Evans asked the former head of the Mossad, the first head of the Mossad in Shin Bet, he said, "Do you think that terrorism will come to America? And if so, where and why?" Isser Harel said, "I fear it will come to you in America. America has the power but not the will to fight terrorism." And then asked about where, Harel continued, "New York City is a symbol of freedom and capitalism. It's likely they will strike the Empire State Building, your tallest building, and a symbol of your power." Now, he made that prediction. He said that in 1980. In order to make his dream come real, he sent these two men, Mossad men, high-level Mossad men, people who have been involved in the kidnapping of Adolf Eichmann and also smuggling plutonium from Pennsylvania to Israel. These were very high-level Mossad people. He sent them to get the security contract for the Port Authority. The Port Authority is the owner of the World Trade Center, was the owner of the World Trade Center. It also controls the ports and the harbors and the airports and the tunnels and the bridges in New York City. So if you have a security contract for the Port Authority, you control not only the security for the Twin Towers, but for all those other agencies as well. But when it was discovered that this man on the bottom, who was the owner of the president of the company that was going to get the security contract, called Atwell Security Tel Aviv, when the Port Authority discovered that this man at the bottom was convicted of murder, complicity in murder in Israel, they tore up the contract. This is in 1987. And the contract was torn up, and the Israelis were thwarted from getting the security contract for the World Trade Center. But then they chose a new route. They went to work for Jules Kroll, the man at the top, an American Jew, Zionist, and Maurice Greenberg down below. These are very high-level Zionist figures in the American Jewish community. And they started working through them to get the security contract, and they got it after the first bombing in 1993 at the World Trade Center.